When you were there, were people trying to get alternative currencies? Or was it harder?
It hadn't got to the point where it was it's kind of an existential need. So when we were in Zim, we were faced with problems like capital controls, getting money out of your country. It's a fairly obvious point, but there's not a huge demand for Zimbabwe dollars outside of Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
There wasn't even in the 1990s. So one of the great things the US obviously has is that there's gigantic demand for US dollars all over the world, as you've just described. And that enables them to export some of their inflation because they've artificially increased the demand for US dollars in multiple different jurisdictions like Zimbabwe who need dollars. So if you want to leave Zimbabwe, it's very hard now. And even when we left, it was extremely difficult to do so.
You mean difficult to leave in terms of what you take with you?
What you take with you.
Yeah.
You know. So actually, the way we did leave, I think I mentioned to Neil.
Danny told me this morning. Yes.
I've got a picture of the car in there.
Oh, you got to show me that.
Do you want to have it?
Well, tell the story.
I'll tell the story.
Yeah.
So like I said, my dad had been in the British Council, retired out there. We bought a little chicken farm, which we ran for a few years. We had 5 or 6 acres, orchard, bunch of chickens. My dad was teaching, and then he eventually retired from teaching as well. He wrote a book. Randomly, that was how I met Mugabe, actually, when I was 15.
You met Mugabe?
Yeah.
I always thought it was unusual that he decided to be only the second person to have a moustache like in that design. I mean, I always thought it was unusual as a tyrant to decide, actually, of all the moustaches I'm going to choose, I'm going to match Hitler.
The thing is, he was a popular president, and I mean, remember. Again, a lot of Zimbabweans will feel conflicted about Mugabe. The guy was a war hero, and he won his country back from the British.
Yeah,
and I think that underlies a lot of the policies that came later.
Yeah,
you know, he fought against the oppressor and he won, and that carried him an enormous length of time. That enabled him to stay in power, even though the economy was collapsing and there was some opposition, and he eventually began to repress that opposition quite violently. But
power corrupts, my friend.
Yeah, to this day, I don't really know what to think about Mugabe, because I grew up in a country that was wealthy and prosperous, in no small part through what he and ZANU had done. But then Zimbabwe is suffering now. It's very sad, to be honest.
It's that really tricky thing. This is where I look at Venezuela, El Salvador with guard, because I've obviously met Bukele on a few occasions. I've interviewed him twice.
How many dictators have we met between us?
How many
dictators have we met between us?
We've met a few. I haven't met Rishi Sunak, but anyway.
He's not a dictator yet.
Yeah, his conservative government are displaying...
I've met Sunak.
Have you?
Yeah.
I think he's fucking terrible.
He's very small.
Is he? But I'm quite small. I think everyone's small compared to you.
I don't know.
Anyone listening?
Danny.
Freddie's shoulders are about the breadth of this table.
Who could deadlift more, me or George from CoinDesk?
Ooh, I would. My money would be on you. George is about Danny's build, but a bit shorter.
But he shifts some tin though.
Yeah, but look at the size. This guy's arms are like my legs. So I've obviously met him, and in preparation for the interviews, I've done my research on Venezuela, the history of corruption within the government, presidents fleeing and hiding out in Nicaragua, or arrested or accidentally dying, who all pilfered the country and essentially never given El Salvador a chance. And the thing about Bukele is he's certainly showing the traits of a dictator, but potentially a benevolent dictator, which if only time will tell, and he will be judged in time. But at the moment, he is changing the fortunes of that country. He's made it significantly safer. He's brought tourism into the country. He's boosted the economy. I mean, he has changed the fortunes of El Salvador. There are questions with regards to human rights, with regards to the rounding up of gang members and imprisoning people without fair trial, etc., which Alex Gladstein has highlighted. But he's changed the fortunes of that country. The constitution says only one term. They found ways around that to have a second term.
People do.
And which, by the way, I think he needs a second term. I mean, one that isn't enough to do the job he's doing, and he could be replaced by somebody who would screw up everything he's done. I think the test of time will be when times turn bad and people turn on him. How does he react? Does he accept it and step down? Does he arrest journalists? Does he imprison opposition? Does he go down that route that many previous dictators, tyrants have gone down, or does he accept it? I mean, I like the guy. I hold him with high regard, and I wish the best for him in that country. But I'm also very guarded because history has told us how this plays out again and again.
Yeah, that's completely true.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I don't feel as I can judge Robert Mugabe. You know, my memories and feelings towards Zimbabwe are coloured by the very happy upbringing and childhood I had there. And I know that his popularity was in no small part to begin with because of what he'd done. I mean, the guy was a political prisoner for quite a long time. And I don't feel as I have to withhold judgment. You know, I loved growing up there. I know that terrible things have happened since it's a very difficult situation.
But Nelson Mandela was also imprisoned, political prisoner,
Yeah, exactly.
Fought for South Africa and died a global hero, somebody who stood up for fairness, democracy, human rights, and was somebody everyone. I've never heard a post-release criticism of him. Of course, I've heard criticism of him as a freedom fighter, or he's accused of being a terrorist.
He was, yeah.
But from his release, I've never heard anyone say anything bad about him. Mugabe's kind of gone the opposite direction in that, yes, and I don't know the history, you know better than me, but I think he destroyed that economy and he has to take responsibility for that. Or he had to. I mean, he's dead now, so.
Yeah. And to be honest, the facts speak for themselves. Whether you attribute blame to a particular person or to a particular policy, the economy did collapse. The currency did hyperinflate, and as Danny said, 90% inflation is not brilliant. So, the country's gone through waves and waves of economic collapse, not just single, but over a couple of decades now.
Was his party ZANU-PF?
ZANU-PF,
yeah. Are they still the ruling party?
They're still, yeah. There are a few. I mean, Morgan Tsvangirai was he was head of the MDC, the Movement for Democratic Change, and he made some strides towards having a second party. But Zimbabwe's a complicated place.
Right. Have you been back?
I went back for a wedding to the northern border with Zambia. Okay. So sadly, I've never been back to Harare, but I have friends there who are talking about, random example, the municipal water supply is now so poor that people are sinking boreholes in their gardens, which is, it wasn't like that when I was there.
So you may have a reason to go back.
I mean, I'd love to go back, particularly with my kids, so they can see where I grew up and why I have a weird accent.
I'd like to go.
It's a wonderful country. I mean, seriously, go to Hwangi, to the national park, go to Victoria Falls, the Eastern Highlands.
I've not actually been to Africa. We were planning to go out there and make films in April. Was it April 20 or April 19?
No, April 2020.
April 20, and obviously all the borders closed. And
the potential for gridless, for example, to start hydro mining in. I mean, one of my we have a sort of Zimbabwean Bitcoiner group, and I keep on banging on about the Kariba Dam.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know the name.
One of the biggest dams in the world. So the Lake Kariba is the size of Wales, and the hydropower from that dam powers a gigantic amount of Zimbabwe's electricity. It's just made for sticking a Bitcoin mine in there, and that instant foreign currency for the country. And the Eastern Highlands are full of little rivers. All of those could be dammed. They could have a small gridless mining unit stuck on them.
Well, we're planning to go out there. So our next films should be out in the next few days, covering mining out in the US. And we want to follow that by looking at what gridless is doing in Kenya. So if I go, I'll let you know. If you want to come out and you want to meet me in Zimbabwe, I'd love to go.
That'd
and
be
see
epic.
We should
bring
your
kids.
Yeah, we should do that. I don't know if I'll bring mine, but
we need to get into the car.
oh yeah, the car.
I'm so sorry.
That was a long story.
Yeah. So there was a long intro.
Danny's not showing me the fucking car.
I'm so sorry. I am rambling a lot.
No, it's good.
Okay.
So start at the beginning. We were planning to come back to the UK for us to finish school and go to university and so on. I'm the eldest of 4 kids. And we sold our house, and then you're left with this problem. I've got all these Zim dollars, which are depreciating like 40-50% a year. And how the fuck do I get them out of the country? I'm allowed to swear.
Yeah, so what the fuck you like.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I get written to all the time. Like, can you stop swearing? I'm listening to this in the car with my children. I'm like, yeah, fuck, sorry.
Sorry, but if I swear in a posh voice, it doesn't really.
It's barely a swear word.
Exactly.
What was it? Stephen Fry, I think he said, why are all words relating to making love considered swear words, but words relating to murder and death aren't?
That's a good point.
Yeah. He's fucking right.
That's one for another podcast.
Yeah, look, I have a foul mouth.
So do I.
My father's learned how bad it is recently.
My children put a swear jar at home, and I'm repeatedly penalised.
Is the jar full?
It's brimming over.
Yeah, my children swear themselves. I tell them not to, but they occasionally a little one slips out here or there.
Oh, mine just think it's so funny. Sorry, anyway, Danny, the car.
Yeah, the car.
So,
get to the fucking car, man.
Yeah, so one thing that a lot of people in Zim do is they buy a car and then you drive it over the border, and literally all of your wealth is sitting in that car.
So there's no facility to send Zimbabwe dollars to the UK at that time?
You could exchange. The exchange rate was terrible, and it was getting worse every day.
So was there a black market exchange rate and like a real exchange rate?
Yeah, as in most developing nations. And it's also very hard to get your bank in the UK to give you pounds for Zim dollars, because the bank in the UK, like we say, there's no market for Zimbabwe dollars. So A, there may be no market, and B, the exchange rate is deteriorating day by day. So we bought a Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow, and then we drove over the border. We packed all of our stuff into a shipping container and then said goodbye and legged it.
How far did you take the car?
2,500 miles, roughly.
So
we drove from Harare down through Zimbabwe, through Masvingo, Great Zimbabwe, which is near where Anita Posh was.
Oh, she's amazing.
Well, I pinged her some sats. She was standing at Great Zimbabwe, which is, if anyone hasn't Googled it, is a sort of, it dates back to the Middle Ages. And it's a gigantic set of stone fortifications and buildings down in the south of the country. She was on Twitter, said, I'm in Zimbabwe. And I said, oh, fucking hell, stick an invoice in. So she did, and I pinged her some sats.
She's an absolute Bitcoin hero.
She's brilliant, isn't she? I love her.
Yeah.
So anyway, we drove down through the whole of Zim, crossed the Limpopo River at the south, Rudyard Kipling's Great Grey Green Greasy Limpopo, if you know your Justice for those stories.
Didn't you make cakes?
That may have been a remote cousin. So this is even older than Boomer stuff. I'm sorry. And then we drove down through the whole of South Africa over a space of about 2 weeks. Absolutely incredible journey through the Drakensberg Mountains, through the Garden Route, the Boer War battlefield, Zulu battlefields, Isandlwana, Rorke's Drift. You may have seen the Michael Caine film Zulu.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So been there.
Please tell me you've seen that. You have not seen Zulu.
No.
We're watching that tonight.
Okay.
Do
I've
you
never
know?
even heard of it.
You've not heard of Zulu?
No.
I've got some.
I promise you, it's incredible.
All right, we'll watch it tonight.
It is good fun.
I think it's Michael Caine's best film.
Wow.
I have some Zulu spears that were supposedly picked up from one of the battlefields. My great grandmother had been born in South Africa, and had collected various weapons and bits and pieces.
Wow.
And then we ended up in Cape Town with the car, drive the car into a container, and then we sailed from Cape Town all the way around Africa, and then back. And then we arrived in Tilbury. The most random. I mean, it was such a weird ending to the journey. It was cold and grey and rainy, and utterly fucking bizarre, because they unloaded our car, opened the container. My dad walked into the container and then reverses out, and then we drive off. And no one stamped our passports. There's no record of us coming into the country.
So were they right-hand drives?
This was exported, so I've got a random. Sorry for the people listening. That's the car in Barberton. That's the town where my
That's absolute classic Rolls Royce.
That's very cool.
We'll have to show it to the camera. That's an absolute classic. It's funny. I'm going to imagine. Tell me if I'm wrong. That car journey is one of your best childhood memories.
Oh, without a doubt, it was just astonishing. I mean,
We did a similar one. We went on holiday to Yugoslavia pre-Balkans War. Must have been, God, what have I been, 5? Do you remember the year?
4 or 5. Yeah, I can't remember.
So we had a Yugoslavian family moving next door to us. I've told this on the podcast, and my mum made a real effort to make them feel welcome, like help them learn English and settle in. And after a year or so, they moved back to Yugoslavia and they invited us out. And I still don't know why we didn't fly. Did they not fly there? I remember. My dad had to take over. But in Yugoslavia, you can't get good things like cameras and TVs and stuff. It's all absolute shit. And so the guy who, the father wanted some of this stuff. So we drove, and it was a 2-day drive through, I can't even remember where, we probably went through France, Belgium, Czechoslovakia, Germany. We went through all these, we drove all the way to Yugoslavia. It took 48 hours. It was a 2-day drive. And it's one of my happiest, I don't remember much from being 5, but I remember this, so many little bits. I remember the sausages that were disgusting that we ate in Germany.
what year were you doing this?
Well, so I would have been about 5, so about 83, 84.
Okay, because we did a similar drive when we went to Syria, but that would have been 80. I would have missed you by a year, but we would have been on the similar
journey.
route. Yeah.
And we drove all the way there. I remember, I can't remember hardly anything from being 5, but I remember that. I remember the bunk beds we stayed in. I remember in the car, because back then there were no phones or anything. No. We're all in the back of was it the Mazda, the white Mazda? Yeah, back of a white Mazda.
There's no headrest.
Was it the Renault?
It was a Renault.
The Renault 18?
You slept on the parcel shelf.
Yeah, so I'd sleep on the parcel shelf. My brother would sleep on the back seat, and my sister would sleep like in the footwell.
Brilliant.
And my equivalent of a iPad was an Etch-a-Sketch. So I'd be playing with an Etch-a-Sketch. And I remember getting to Belgrade, and we went out and we got watermelon. I remember us going to the coast, and we needed matches, and me and their son went out and went into every tent stealing people. We had like an arm full of matches. I remember so much of that, and I can't remember much else of my childhood, but that's such distinct memories.
Yeah, very much so. And my brother was the same age when we did this drive, and I think this is one of his earliest memories. He was 5 when we left.
So you got into the UK and sold the Rolls Royce and rebuilt the life.
Yeah, although I did notice it took my dad quite a long time to sell the car.
Did he not want to sell it?
I suspect not. He absolutely fucking loved it. I mean, it was a gorgeous machine.
Yeah.
Eventually, under pressure, he bowed down, and the car was sadly sold. But that represented our life in Zimbabwe in that vehicle.